When we look into the 21st century, clearly with globalization, complexity of what's happening in the world, our belief is judgment's going to be even more important and more critical. And we said, let's look at some of the bad judgments that have happened in the last year. I mean, Chuck Prince got fired at Citigroup for bad judgment. Stan O'Neill got fired at Merrill Lynch for bad judgments as things blew up and they didn't see it in a complex world. And it's a little more complicated than that on some of those that were bad people judgments. Chuck Prince was a lawyer who didn't have much background in financial services, didn't align a team around him to give enough information. Stan O'Neill, from all reports at Merrill Lynch, was just a really tough guy that didn't listen to anybody. He never got the data. And then the board he put in place, his judgment, he hadn't treated very nicely, so when he got in trouble, he's out. Michael Dell is another example of bad judgment in losing out to Hewlett-Packard. And so I think in the world today, it's going to be even more complex, more challenging, and at the end of the day, it's judgment that counts. Indra Nooyi, the new CEO of PepsiCo, is making some huge strategic judgments as to where that company is going in terms of moving more into health food, less off the base of salty snacks and food that's not as healthy, much more on globalization. The Jeff Immelts of the world moving GE's portfolio into what he calls eco-imagination, which is products that do well for the environment because they make turbines, they have wind technology, they have technology for locomotives, and they're making motors and major appliances and lighting. So a lot of their products can be configured to help solve environmental issues or make them worse. Big strategic judgments. So I think as we move into the world of globalization, technology, climate change, citizenship issues, judgment's going to be even more important. The one topic that we haven't found anybody has really written about is judgment. And then we started thinking, well, what do we really mean by that? And we started reviewing the literature, and most of the literature is about decision making. You know, how leaders should make decisions. Here are the 7 rules, and we both teach MBAs, and there are all kinds of algorithms for decision making. And I said, you know, in our own experience, Warren was president of the University of Cincinnati. I've run a rural health clinic. I've run GE Crotonville. We've interviewed, hundreds of leaders. That's not how these leaders make these judgments. When Jeff Immelt spends $10 billion for Amersham, he didn't follow the 7 easy steps for decision making. So he said, we better go out and spend time with these leaders and really clinically understand how they make the big judgments. As we got working in the field and thinking about it and reviewing our own experience and research, he said there are really 3 leadership judgments that matter. People, strategy, prices. People is who's on your team or off your team. Strategy, what mountain do we climb, and every so often there's a storm and a crisis. And what makes a good leader is they make good judgments on those big issues. We also found out if you don't get the people judgments right, you're in trouble on getting a strategy, and you get into a crisis, you end up like some of the examples we have in the book, including Jack Nasser at Ford when the Firestone crisis hit, did not have an aligned, supportive team around him, ended up organizing a coup d'etat, got him thrown out, lost his job. So we then said, okay, if those are the 3 categories, judgment isn't just a blink, just something that happens, it's part of a process. And so we framed it as there's preparation, you make the call, there's execution. And a good leader owns that whole process. And it starts with sensing and identifying the need for judgment. Second thing is then you have to frame and name what the judgment is about. Third, mobilize and align the appropriate people to support making the call, which is the middle phase. And then execution is making it happen and also making corrections. So one of the examples in the book that kind of highlights the framework I think best is A.G. Lafley, CEO of Procter & Gamble. When he took over, the previous CEO had lasted 17 months. Stock was going down 30%. He gets a call from the chairman of the board, Pepper. He's running the beauty care business in California. I want to talk to you about becoming the next CEO. He figures, well, in 3-4 years maybe. No, tomorrow morning. You fly back to Cincinnati, you're the next CEO tomorrow morning. He takes over and he says, the first 100 days were one heck of a confidence build. The stock keeps going down another 30%. One of their biggest businesses is diapers. $8 billion plus business in Procter & Gamble. That business is heading south. He frames that and names it as, I don't need to go coach that team. I don't need to hire them consultants. I don't have the right leader. So he framed it as a leadership issue, and I need to find the right leader. And he and one other executive said, here's the right person, Deb Henretta, late 30s, female marketing executive who's going to run a business dominated by engineers who could get every penny out of every diaper, every penny out of every machine. And so he announces it at the morning meeting, and he said by 3 o'clock the revolution was on. Every vice chairman was in his office yelling, every president, how could you do this? You're going to destroy the company, the business. And he had made a mistake. He had missed the third step in preparation, mobilize and align key stakeholders. He jumped ahead to the call. So we came up with something called a redo loop, like in programming. You made a mistake, you go back, and the redo loop, and he said, okay, I want my top team sitting around the table tomorrow morning. I want each of you to come in with your candidates. And one at a time, give me the case, maybe we missed something. And he spent 2 hours. At the end, he said, you know, Oscar, that was a good idea, but here's why I think Deb's a better choice. And Noel, here's view on that. At the end, he said, we're going to go ahead with Deb. And then he didn't walk away from her. He didn't say, good luck, Deb. Hope you can turn that business around. It would have taken, I don't know, a month or so for the good old boys to kill her. I mean, he had to stay with her in the execution and support her in getting rid of most of that team and make sure that the execution happened. And when we talked to him at the end of our discussion, he said, thank God it worked. He said, imagine this, female, 38 years old, talking about the customer from outer space as far as these guys were concerned. She's now running Asia Pacific for Procter & Gamble. The business turned around. It was a beautiful judgment. But it makes the point that you have to own as a leader that whole process from sense identify, frame it and name it, mobilize and align, make the call, and stay with the execution. And there will be redo loops. You can make a mistake, go back, fix it, stay with it. So that's the framework. And every one of those steps, people make mistakes. Michael Dell missed sense and identify the changing industry in the personal computer industry in the United States, and his market capitalization flipped from being twice the size of Hewlett-Packard to now half the size. It happened in a matter of 18 months. He fell asleep at the switch. He ended up firing Kevin Rollins, the CEO, and even though their offices were connected and they were there together the whole time, but I guess if your name is Dell and the company's name is Dell, you're the last to go. But even great leaders like Michael Dell don't sense and identify the need for judgment. So that's the framework, and we say if you don't get the people right, then it's hard to get the strategy right because people are playing games or they're not aligned, and you end up in a crisis very much like Jack Nasser. So that's the framework.